Good afternoon, everybody. Please be seated. Routine proceedings, introduction of bills. The Honourable Member for Rossmere.
I move, seconded by the Honourable Member for Brandon East, that Bill 235, the Employment Standards Code Amendment Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for Rossmere, seconded by the Honourable Member for Brandon East, that Bill number 235, the Employment Standards Code Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Member for Rossmere.
Madam Speaker, none of us here are untouched by grief of a lost one, of the passing of a loved one. This bill expands what is required from 3 bereavement days to 5. It also acknowledges the loss of miscarriage and stillbirth in its considerations. Thank you.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed, and so ordered. Committee reports, tabling of reports, ministerial statements. The Honourable Minister of Sport, Culture and Heritage, and I would indicate that the required 90 minutes notice prior to routine proceedings was provided in accordance with Rule 27(2). Would the Honourable Minister please proceed with his statement?
Madam Speaker, I rise today to recognize the life and legacy of Paul Gerard, the first black assistant coach in the National Hockey League, a hometown hero, a true trailblazer, and in the sport of hockey. Born on April 20th, 1965 here in Winnipeg, Mr. Gerard's passion for hockey began at local arenas in East Kildonan and Transcona. He would go on to be drafted by the New York Rangers in 1983, then traded to the Minnesota North Stars, before continuing his hockey career with various teams in the American League and International Hockey League. As an athlete, Mr. Gerard was known for his defensive prowess, but where he really thrived was on the bench as an assistant coach. For over 25 years, he coached some of hockey's great stars with teams from the university level through to the National Hockey League. In these roles, Mr. Gerard was an accomplished and respected leader who inspired the best in his athletes. Madam Speaker, what stands out in Mr. Gerard's hockey career is not that his talent as an athlete or as a coach, but his exceptional character. He was known to be a compassionate individual who dedicated his life to helping others realize their potential. He gave of his time freely and was an active member of the NHL's BIPOC coaches program, where he worked alongside Black, Indigenous coaches and players of color to mentor and motivate the next generation of hockey players. Representation in sport is pivotal to inspiring young athletes to pursue their athletic goals. 40 years ago, there were a few players of color in the National Hockey League, let alone in the NHL, in the sport of hockey, let alone in the NHL. Today, in arenas across Canada, youth of all backgrounds lace up their skates to play our nation's game. Role models like Mr. Gerard have helped to open the doors for hockey to become a reflective sport in our multicultural mosaic. While there is so much more work to be done, it is clear that much progress has been made, not just in hockey, but across our entire sporting world. In Manitoba, sports organizations from the grassroots through to high performance level continue to prioritize programs and initiatives that support diversity, equality, and inclusion in sports. We can be proud of Manitoba leaders like Mr. Gerard, who have paved the way for these advances. Madam Speaker, Mr. Gerard sadly passed away in February after a courageous battle with cancer. He has left behind not only a legacy, but a permanent impression on the hockey world in our province and across North America. His memory will be an inspiration for years to come. Also, Madam Speaker, as we speak of memories and inspiration, we cannot forget that today is the anniversary of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash, where 16 people lost their lives. The parents of Humboldt Broncos defenseman Logan Belay offered to donate his organs so that 6 lives could continue on. They did so because Logan told his parents he was registering as an organ donor and that he was inspired by his coach and mentor, Rick. The leadership and mentorship of coaches like Rick and Paul Gerard live on forever in the lives of these athletes. Madam Speaker, I ask that all members join me in commemorating and celebrating Mr. Paul Gerard's exceptional life and career, as well as the legacy of Rick and Logan Boulay. I would ask now that we stand and recognize Paul's wife, Cheryl Gerard, in the gallery, Paul's daughter, Catherine Gerard Rosen, Paul's mother, Marilyn Gerard, and there's a list of 10 other family members here. Madam Speaker, I ask for leave that all the guest names here on behalf of Paul Gerard's family be included in Hansard. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Is there leave to include all of the names of the guests in Hansard? Leave has been granted. The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today we recognize the important contributions made by Paul Gerard, one of the first Black coaches in the NHL. Gerard was born right here in Winnipeg and had a passion for the game of hockey from a very young age. He was admired for his skills and his skillful approach towards connecting with players. He played for teams like the New York Rangers and Minnesota North Stars and Hershey Bears. Gerard was full of life in everything that he did. It was evident from a young age that he loved playing hockey and loved interacting with both players and coaches. In between his jobs in the NHL as a professional defenseman, Gerard was an assistant coach in the American Hockey League in Iowa, Texas, Utica, and Hershey. And after spending most of his career as a defenseman, Gerard went into coaching when he hung up his skates. PJ, as he was often recalled, approached every day with unmatched enthusiasm and put his teammates and the program of hockey first. Gerard had such a positive attitude towards hockey and the work that he did that it was said that he never worked in a day in his life. And he surrounded himself with players that were in such a lively environment. Gerard's commitment to the sport was one of a kind. He was an active member in the NHL's Coaches Association's BIPOC Coaches Program. He was an exemplary leader whose generosity in sharing his knowledge to work with other coaches in the mentoring BIPOC Coaches Program. Beyond being just a coach, Gerard was a beacon of hope in the community, bringing light to locker rooms and touching the lives in no small way. He was an incredible role model and a pace setter for the BIPOC community in our city of Winnipeg and around North America at large. His passing has left a great vacuum in sports and in our hearts. And in his words that he said himself, quote, "I just want to make sure that I'm a good coach and a good role model and a good citizen. And if by doing that, I can be a positive role model for those kids, that's a great byproduct." Mr. Gerard will be missed, but we will continue to draw inspiration from the phenomenal trail he blazed while he was with us. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
Madam Speaker, I ask for leave to respond to the Minister's statement.
Does the member have leave to respond to the ministerial statement? Leave has been granted. The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand to recognize the incredible contributions made by Paul Gerard, a former NHL player and coach, a proud Winnipegger, and a trailblazer as the first Black coach in the NHL. Paul Gerard passed away on February 15, 2023, at age 57 after fighting a long-term battle with cancer. A little bit about his story. He was drafted by the New York Rangers in the 1983 NHL draft after playing with Athol Murray College of Notre Dame in Saskatchewan and collegiate hockey at Lake Superior State University. After spending one season with the Colorado Avalanche, Gerard spent 2 seasons with Dallas Stars and most recently 2 seasons with the Calgary Flames between 2016 and 2018. Paul Gerard was known for being a great listener who was compassionate and authoritative. He was trusted immensely by players and colleagues. Between his NHL jobs, he assisted on hockey teams and he himself played as a defenseman in the minors from 1983 to 1987, and he played in 5 NHL games with Minnesota North Stars during 1988 and 89. Madam Speaker, he was also an active member for the NHL Coaches Association BIPOC Coaches Program, where he was known as an incredible coach, but more than this, he was known as a great human. He would coach, mentor, share advice and wisdom, and he often spoke about wanting kids to see and be part of more people of color playing, officiating, and coaching. Madam Speaker, we as Manitobans are proud of outstanding hockey talent, but we need to also recognize that Paul Gerard was an exceptionally hardworking and humble man and should be recognized for being a family man, a role model, and for contributing to better minority representation in hockey. Madam Speaker, I'd like to share our condolences with his loved ones who have joined us here today and thank the Minister for bringing forward the statement. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister for Sport, Culture and Heritage.
Madam Speaker, I ask for leave for a moment of silence for Paul Gerard, his family, and the Humboldt Broncos.
Is there leave to have a moment of silence? Leave has been granted. Please stand. Members' statements. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in the House today to acknowledge the amazing team behind Cornerstone Alliance Church's food drive and wardrobe events. Cornerstone is a church in the Southdale constituency. They run a food bank every second Wednesday and a free clothing event called the Wardrobe every 6 weeks. To run the food bank, Cornerstone works with Harvest Manitoba. Harvest drops off a truckload of food and the team works quickly to organize the food into orders. They serve around 80 community members each time. They make sure those who need help accessing quality food receive it. Not only that, Cornerstone makes sure those who need clothing items get them too. The team takes in donations of clean, gently used clothing and shoes and then arranges them by category and size on racks for browsing during the wardrobe events. Sitting in the visitor gallery today are Josh Goudreau, Claude Verrier, Elaine Dirksen, Alex Mercredi, Liban Escaro, Judy Holokoff, Marilyn Cote, and Pastor Joel Black. These individuals, along with other staff and volunteers not present today, run the food bank and wardrobe events. They work tirelessly to respond to community needs. They are integral to the community presence of Cornerstone, and they add so much life to our community. Just recently, I heard that they even have started dropping off baked goods every month to our local fire hall. Thank you for all of your work. Madam Speaker, I am providing a list of the names of the individuals in attendance today to be included in Hansard. I ask all the members in the chamber to join me in thanking these hardworking individuals for their selfless service. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for the Pas-Camissac.
Madam Speaker, Kinanas Kumatin, today I'm honored to recognize a remarkable and resilient community member who has grown so close. She is like a family member of my own. My guest today has shown great effort to paying back the strength and care that the community offered her in times of need. Her commitment to protecting vulnerable communities, community wellness, and turning even the most difficult struggles into successes has shown the value of second chances. Florence Halcrow has overcome adversity and put community-focused wellness and advocacy at the center of her life and career after living through hardship, making mistakes, and having experienced incarceration. The support that Florence found from the community through adversity, however, was instrumental in making her trajectory into one of growth, restoration, and healing. Thanks to the help of community members and organizations focused on giving second chances and support to those who never received them, Florence was able to commit her journey of healing herself, her relations with family, and uses her experiences to help others. In April 2021, the Ask Auntie program was born as a part of the Brandon Neighborhood Renewal Corporation. As an Indigenous-focused and Indigenous-led program, the group provides general support, unconditional care, and wisdom. During the pandemic, Ask Auntie built partnerships with other community organizations to provide direct support, accommodation, and connect vulnerable people with resources to change their situation. As the Ask Auntie program coordinator, Florence has been able to give back to the community that supported her and used her lived experiences to connect with other struggling community members and pass on positive change to others who did not have the right opportunities. The positive impact that Florence and the rest of the Ask Auntie team have been able to make on the community is incredible. I would like for my colleagues to join me in welcoming Florence Halcrow for joining us today in the gallery and thanking her for the work she has done to create a more caring community. Egwasa.
The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Madam Speaker, it's a sad day for Chris Dunn, a sad day for healthcare in Manitoba, and a sad day for the present government. I've written 4 letters to the Minister about the precarious situation of Chris Dunn from Dauphin, who has an eye condition, diabetic retinopathy, which needs treatment every 3 months or he may go blind. Sadly, he's been unable to receive treatment since September 2022, as he can't travel to Winnipeg for treatment, being the primary caregiver for his sick mother. The Minister promised treatment would be available in Dauphin starting in fall 2022. Delays and prevarication by the Minister and her government occurred. As of the end of March of this year, visits had not even started. On April 3rd, with great fanfare, the Minister went to the airport for a photo op with the eye specialist on his way to Dauphin to provide the eye treatment. But this was arranged last minute, and Chris Dunn wasn't informed and was unable to get an appointment with the eye specialist. To make matters worse, instead of all patients from multiple doctors being seen each visit, only the visiting doctor's patients are being seen, and the first doctor was not his doctor. Mr. Dunn's eye doctor is not scheduled to go to Dauphin till October 2023. Mr. Dunn could be blind by then. Mr. Dunn now has to find out which doctor is scheduled to come out at the start of May and then ask his eye doctor to refer him to that particular specialist. But his doctor's office has no access to the schedule. The project is failing Mr. Dunn and undoubtedly others in similar desperate circumstances. It's not the right care in the right place at the right time. Next time, perhaps the Minister should check that the program is actually going to work for those who need it before arranging a photo op. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Madam Speaker, small businesses in Manitoba have been hit hard by the pandemic. Through lockdowns and related struggles, Manitoba has 21 fewer small businesses than before the pandemic. This means that many small businesses were not able to survive the years of little support from the provincial government when compounded with prolonged and recurring public mismanagement of the pandemic. Right now, small businesses face record levels of debt, meaning that they are less able to grow, hire fewer employees, and are struggling more. This is a threat to the viability of small businesses in Manitoba and desperately needs to be addressed. The PC government has not adequately supported our small entrepreneurs during the ongoing pandemic or responded to repeated calls of small business owners and advocates. What programs have been offered by the province have fallen flat, which was made clear by the low uptake from businesses. Another unacceptable statistic, which we have seen come out of the pandemic, is that Manitoba has the second highest increase in all of Canada for shelter costs. This increase, 7.3%, is even higher than the rate of inflation and has meant that Manitobans are finding it harder to survive while supports are being removed from beneath our families. Skyrocketing inflation, groceries, and shelter has meant that Manitobans have less money to spend in the economy, and small businesses will continue to struggle. Manitoba also has the second highest rate of low-income persistence out of all provinces, meaning if you were born into poverty, it's not likely you'll ever grow out of poverty in your lifetime. This is why the government should be focusing on making life more affordable for Manitobans and breaking the systemic barriers which we know exist, and without a solution being actively sought, Manitoba will keep its rigid income disparity. We also have among the lowest average weekly earnings, meaning Manitobans are compensated less when compared to other provinces. This is a persistent failing of our province, an absolutely devastating look at our support for small businesses. This is what Manitobans are facing under the PC government.
The member's time has expired. There is a request for a leave for the member to complete his statement. Leave has been denied. The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Madam Speaker, today I rise in this chamber to pay tribute to my brother-in-law and my great friend, Paul Gerard. To the hockey world, he was both a player and coach. To our family, he was Uncle Paul. To even many kids in Verdun, where Paul had developed and ran his Gerard Sport Hockey School for 5 years, he was also known as Uncle Paul. Our two kids remember fond memories of their summer vacations spent with Paul and his amazing wife, Cheryl, and their two daughters, Catherine and Megan. With Paul's hockey career, they lived in many different cities across North America, including Lowell, Massachusetts, Michigan, Denver, Des Moines, Dallas, Calgary, Omaha, and my personal favorite, Hershey, Pennsylvania. Our family has amazing memories of those locations, Madam Speaker. My son Aiden and his Uncle Paul had a special relationship. My sister-in-law, Cheryl, always said that Aiden was like a son to Paul, since he had two daughters. Aiden has many memories of cross-country drives with his uncle, as the two of them went to Bob Hartley Hockey School every year in New York, Pennsylvania, where Paul instructed and Aiden attended. Paul truly believed in networking and making lifelong connections as a priority in his life. I wanted to share with you one example Paul had a difference that he made for many players as he coached and mentored. At his funeral, I had the opportunity to talk to Eric Perrin, who played for the Tampa Bay Lightning when they won the Stanley Cup in 2004. Eric explained that if it wasn't for Paul's mentoring and his encouragement, he would not have been playing in the NHL, and of course, he would not have been on a Stanley Cup winning team. The family had heard and read so many similar stories from several college players, coaches, as well as current and former NHL players, the impact that Paul had on them. There's a Christmas. One of my favorite Christmas movies is The Wonderful Life. There was an inscription on a book that Clarence the angel gives to the main character George Bailey that reads, "Remember, no man is a failure who has friends." Then George Bailey's brothers raises his glass and toasts, "George Bailey, the richest man in town." Madam Speaker, for all the friends Paul had made in the hockey world, combined with the friends that he made in communities wherever he lived, Madam Speaker, Paul was the richest man in town, and he was the richest man in hockey, measured by all the lives he touched and the friends he made along the way in his short time on this earth. Rest in peace, my friend, until we meet again. Prior to oral questions, I have some guests that I would like to introduce to you.
In the loge to my right, we have the former MLA for Sturgeon Creek, Jerry McAlpine, joining us today. And seated in the public gallery from Acadia Junior High, we have 25 grade 9 students under the direction of Wendy McClellan, and this group is located in the constituency of the Honourable Member for Fort Richmond. On behalf of all Honourable Members, we welcome all of you to the Manitoba Legislature. Oral questions, the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Madam Speaker, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the anniversary of the tragedy that befell the Humboldt Broncos. April 6, 2018 is a day that changed our country forever. It is an absolute sorrow-filled memory, I think, for the families and survivors, and of course all the friends and those affected. So many of us are hockey families. All of us have participated in the national pastime in one way or the other. And I think that's why it was so easy for all of us as Canadians to empathize and to ask those questions of, what if, as it pertains to this tragedy. So even though half a decade has passed, these memories are still fresh. And I just want to take this opportunity on behalf of my colleagues to extend our deepest condolences to the survivors and to their families, and to let the Humboldt Broncos know you will always be remembered.
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Our hearts go out to the entire Humboldt community, hockey community, and of course the families and friends impacted by the sudden tragic death of those 16 individuals. Today marks, Madam Speaker, the 5th anniversary of this tragedy, and we remember and honor the 16 lives that were lost, and of course the 13 surviving teammates, and of course the families whose lives were changed forever. Forever, Madam Speaker, Canadians will remain Humboldt strong, which is why today we are wearing these green and yellow pins today. I also just want to take this opportunity to extend our deepest condolences to the family of Paul Gerard, the Gerard and Panook families who are here with us today, and of course to my dear friend and colleague, the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, for their loss of someone who is an icon and a legend in hockey as well.
And with Speaker's latitude, I will not consider that the first question. So I will now recognize the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on his first question.
Thank you kindly, Madam Speaker, for your discretion. Manitobans know that Brian Pallister caused a lot of damage to health care in this great province. Brian Pallister closed emergency rooms at Concordia, Victoria, at Seven Oaks. Brian Pallister cut cancer care funding by millions of dollars, and he closed cancer care community clinics in Manitoba. He also cut outpatient physiotherapy. Now, in spite of this being common knowledge to everybody in the province, the Premier this week says that Brian Pallister made some improvements to healthcare in Manitoba. Will the Premier tell the House why she thinks Brian Pallister improved healthcare in Manitoba? Good question.
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I think it's important for Manitobans to know and remember what took place under the previous NDP government under Greg Selinger, who of course was the mentor of the current leader of the opposition. Now what happened back in those days in 2015 and 16, according to the High report at the time, Madam Speaker, Manitoba's ER waits were the longest in the country. And also, Madam Speaker, in a High report, wait times for priority procedures in Canada, again in 2015, Madam Speaker, Manitoba was the worst province west of the Maritime for cataract surgeries. But Madam Speaker, we know that Manitobans do not want to go back to those dark days of the previous NDP government, Madam Speaker. We are making record investments in our healthcare system. We recognize there's more work to do, Madam Speaker, and we're committed to getting the job done.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, healthcare is worse in Manitoba today than it has ever been. Patients are waiting longer than ever before.
Order.
The emergency rooms have hallway medicine to the likes of which have never been seen in Manitoba. And the reason why is because Brian Pallister cut healthcare. He cut healthcare when he first got into office. He cut healthcare while the member for Tuxedo was the health minister. And now today, we see that the Premier continues to implement Brian Pallister's plan for healthcare. In fact, in spite of all the evidence and the collective experience of Manitobans, she insists that Brian Pallister improved healthcare in this province. Will she simply explain to the people of Manitoba why she thinks Brian Pallister improved Manitoba's healthcare?
The Honourable First Minister.
Once again, fact versus fiction, Madam Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition continues along the path of putting false information on the record in this chamber. He knows full well, and all the members opposite know full well, that we are investing more than $2 billion more than the NDP ever did in healthcare alone in the province of Manitoba. But, Madam Speaker, I want to remind Manitobans that under Greg Selinger, when he was Premier of the province, again, the Leader of the Opposition's mentor, of course, at that time, Madam Speaker, the Kai-Hai report also, in talking about wait time priority procedures in Canada, Manitoba was the third worst province for hip replacements, Madam Speaker. It also went on to say that Manitoba has had the highest ambulance fees in the country, Madam Speaker. That's why we took action and we cut those ambulance fees in half so that Manitobans would have the access to health care.
Hey.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
Problem is, no one can get an ambulance to show up in rural Manitoba anymore under this government. Manitobans are waiting in emergency rooms longer than ever before. And those paramedics who are working on the front lines have had their wages frozen for half a decade by this Premier and by Brian Pallister. Everyone in Manitoba knows that healthcare got worse under Brian Pallister and under this Premier. That's a fact. The only fiction is that the PCs are somehow going to change just because it's an election year. So we know that she said Brian Pallister improved healthcare in this very chamber, this very week, in the Estimates Committee. We're simply asking her today, and I'll repeat the question one more time. Can the Premier explain why she thinks Brian Pallister improved health care in our province?
Great question. The Honourable First Minister.
Well, once again, Madam Speaker, the litany of false accusations by the Leader of the Opposition never seems to cease. On that side of the House. But we will continue to put the facts on the record, Madam Speaker. Now, the facts are, we understand and we recognize that there's a health human resource challenge, not just here in Manitoba, but right across the country. And we know that that has transpired as a result of the pandemic, and there's been some challenges, and we're taking action on that. But back in the dark days of the NDP government, doctors were leaving for other jurisdictions in droves, Madam Speaker. In fact, between 2000 and 2016, under the NDP government, more than 2,200 doctors left this province for other jurisdictions, Madam Speaker. Manitobans do not want to go back to the dark days of that NDP government.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a new question.
It's a simple question, Madam Speaker. Should the Manitoba government send million-dollar checks to billionaires who don't even live in Manitoba? Yes or no? On this side of the House, we think that sending checks to billionaires who don't live here or contribute to our province is not the right approach, particularly as schools go underfunded. These billionaires did not ask for these checks, and we should not send them millions of dollars at a time when kids are struggling to be able to access the education that they need. Does the Premier agree, or does the Premier plan to keep sending checks out of province to billionaires just like Brian Pallister?
The Honourable First Minister.
Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition was all over the map in that question, Madam Speaker, but I certainly appreciate any question about affordability. We know that as a result of the NDP Liberal coalition, Madam Speaker, that carbon taxes have been increasing in the province of Manitoba. We have called on that NDP Liberal coalition to stop that, to make sure that life is more affordable for Manitobans, while the NDP and Liberal here in Manitoba continue to support that. That doesn't make life more affordable for Manitobans, Madam Speaker. We will continue to make life more affordable for Manitobans.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
I just want to quickly remind the Premier that in this chamber she twice voted for a PC carbon tax. That's right. So it's another Stephenson government flip-flop. But the question at hand is about billionaires outside of Manitoba getting million-dollar checks from this government. We know that that big Bay Street real estate firm, $20 billion market cap, Cadillac Fairview, they got a $1 million check from this government. Charles Koch got a check for $80,000 from this government. He's the 21st richest person in the entire world, and no, he does not live in Manitoba. The Canadian cheese giant Saputo is worth nearly $5 billion. They got a check for tens of thousands of dollars from this Premier. This is as school divisions, like the Interlake School Division, are forced to cut teaching positions. Will the Premier explain to Manitobans why she underfunds schools with one hand and then hands out
the member's time has expired. Just a reminder to members that we have a lot of guests in the gallery today, so I think they would like to be able to hear the questions and answers, as would I. The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And the Leader of the Opposition and all members opposite know that in the budget that we recently tabled in this chamber had a 6.1% increase to education funding, record increases in funding for education. It's time to remind Manitobans what the NDP did when we presented those record increases. I think the largest increase in 25 years, or even more than that, 40 years, Madam Speaker, in the province of Manitoba. And each and every one of the NDP voted against that. More money for education, more affordability for Manitobans. That's what we stand for, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
You know, Madam Speaker, Brian Pallister decided it was a good idea to send million-dollar checks to billionaires, and this Premier decided it was a good idea to continue the practice. Now, this Premier then turned around and brought in a budget that is forcing the Interlake School Division, along with many others, to cut teaching positions. At the same time, they refuse to fund a nutrition program in schools. In fact, the member from Redison says that funding school nutrition programs is a bad idea. This same government turns around and gives a $1 million check to a big real estate firm headquartered on Bay Street. They send tens of thousands of dollars to some of the richest people in the world, none of whom live in Manitoba or contribute substantively to our society. So the question that the Premier should ask is the question that every voter in Manitoba will be confronted with this year. Do you want to send more money to billionaires outside of the province, or do you want to feed hungry kids right here at home?
The Honourable First Minister.
Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition continues to put blatantly false information on the record in this. And so let's say what the facts are, Madam Speaker. We have invested as a government $2.5 million in the Children's Nutrition Council of Manitoba. That is more money for nutrition for children, not less, like the NDP just accused, Madam Speaker.
That's right.
But beyond that, Madam Speaker, beyond that, by increasing the basic personal amount in Manitoba, by giving more affordability and tax relief to those Manitobans, we are taking more than 47 Manitobans off of the tax roll in Manitoba. That helps people with low-income Manitobans. That's what we stand for. They have nothing. They don't stand for anything, Madam Speaker.
Although these students left the gallery, I would like to put on record that we had seated in the public gallery from Acadia Junior High another 25 grade 9 students under the direction of Wendy McClellan, and this group is located in the constituency of the Honourable Member for Fort Richmond. The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Linda Mary Beardy was a 33-year-old Indigenous woman and a mother to 4 beautiful children. She was loved by her family and her community of Lake St. Martin. 2 days ago, her body was found at the Brady landfill. Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited folks face savage and epidemic levels of violence here in Manitoba. Much more must be done to protect Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited. Can the Premier explain what actions she's taking to protect Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited?
The Honourable Minister of Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And our Premier has already expressed condolences to the family and friends of community of Ms. Beardy. And I also extend that on behalf of all of us. To listen to the member from St. John insinuate that nothing has been done. I look back over the past 7 years working with the people in this side of the government and the progress that has been made. And I certainly want to speak to all ministers of justice, ministers of mental health and wellness, minister of families, minister of health. We have come a long ways. Is there ways to go? Absolutely there is. But this government is working hard for all those families.
The Honourable Member for St. John's on a supplementary question.
I don't know what the minister means when she says we've come a long way, when 2 days ago an Indigenous woman, a mother, was found in Brady landfill. When 3 months ago the police announced a serial killer of 4 Indigenous women, of whom have not been returned to their families. We haven't come a long way, Madam Speaker. And this morning, the Premier was asked on CBC to name just one of the National Inquiry's calls to justice that she's implemented. She couldn't name one single thing that this government has done. That's shameful. Can the Premier explain why she's failed to act to implement any of the National Inquiry's calls to justice?
The Honourable First Minister.
To rise in the House and correct the record. The member is absolutely wrong in her assertion. This is an absolutely tragic situation that remains under investigation. And I would suggest that before putting more information on the record, that the member allow for that investigation to continue on. What I said on the radio this morning is that we have acted to ensure that we put together a group of, including the police, RCMP, Winnipeg Police, a working group on missing people to ensure that we prevent more people. So what that organization does is they look for those who are in most need of help ahead of time to prevent them from getting into those situations, Madam Speaker. That is taking action, Madam Speaker. That is what we were doing. This member is absolutely wrong and should apologize.
The honourable member for St. John's on a final supplementary.
That was a shameful answer from the woman who runs the province here in respect of the murder of Indigenous women and girls in this province. 2 questions, 3 questions now, they haven't put one action that they've put to implement any of the calls to justice from the National Inquiry. Linda Beardy was only 33 years old. That's younger than most people in this chamber. And this Premier and none of these ministers can get up and talk about what they're going to do to immediately implement the National Inquiry's calls to justice. That's shameful, and if anybody should be getting up to apologize...
The member's time has expired. The Honourable Minister of Families.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And it is absolutely shameful that that member is politicizing this death. And our government sends condolences to the family and the loved ones for this tragic loss. Some of the things that our government has done recently under this Premier's leadership is $1.5 million investment to Velma's House, which is a 24/7 safe space for women. We have established a matriarchal governing group to ensure the implementation of all those calls for justice under the MMIWG inquiry and that will be led by Sandra Delarond and the Mama Wichita folks to ensure the implementation. We passed Clare's Law, which answers the calls of 2 particular calls for justice under the report, as well as last week we announced a $1.3 million sexual assault emergency response, which answers the calls to 5 calls for justice.
Has expired. The honourable member for Concordia.
Madam Speaker, this Stephenson's government's bad decisions are making life more expensive once again. This time, it's your MPI rates, which have increased because of mismanagement by the PCs, and it's only going to get worse. MPI's IT upgrade, known as Project Nova, is now years behind schedule and $200 million over budget and counting, and it's all because of PC interference. This is just the beginning. PCs are now spending millions on outside consultants rather than being accountable to Manitobans. Will the Premier just tell Manitobans how much more their autopack rates will go up this year because of their mismanagement?
Very good question.
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development, Investment and Trade.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, Finchie coming from the member opposite today. I'll put some facts on the record, Madam Speaker. We know that the former government had, my mic is on.
There it is.
The former government has had 17 years, Madam Speaker, to deal with the IT issue at MPI, Madam Speaker. What did the members opposite do for 17 years? Nothing, Madam Speaker. We are taking the initiative to ensure that we bring MPI into the 21st century,
Well done,
not
Sal.
like the days of the dark days of the NDP.
That's right.
The honourable member for Concordia on a supplementary question.
To bring the minister up to speed on this issue, here's what's going on at MPI. An $82 million project has ballooned to nearly $300 million because of PC mismanagement. They're taking money that should have gone to Manitoba drivers, and Manitobans are already paying higher rates because of this PC chaos. Instead of taking accountability, the government is now trying to buy time with a 9-month review, a review that just so happens to be complete after Election Day. It's clear the PCs desperately want to buy time and to shift blame. Will the Premier stop ducking and just tell us her plan to raise autopack rates again this year?
Honourable Minister of Economic Development, Investment and Trade.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. And our government will definitely not put ratepayers at risk like the NDP did, Madam Speaker. With Manitoba Hydro, Madam Speaker, I will remind the members what they did. $4 billion over budget, Madam Speaker. Ouch. That is absolutely shameful. Absolutely. Went around the PUB, Madam Speaker. Shame. That now they claim to be champions on, Madam Speaker. We know that going back to the dark days of NDP government, can't even say it, don't want to say it, Madam Speaker. We don't want to go there. Manitobans don't want to go there. We will not go there.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Concordia on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, Manitobans want answers on Project Nova, and they're just not getting them from this PC government. Instead, once again, they're using a multi-million-dollar consultants to hide. But here's the thing. It's the PC's handpicked board that manages the Crown and reports directly to the minister. And according to his CEO, who speaks to the minister bi-weekly, the PC board is, quote, extremely supportive of what's going on at MPI. The Premier can't claim to be in the dark on this one. Her minister has been lockstep with the CEO and the board this entire time. So someone's obviously not telling the truth, Madam Speaker. It's time to come clean. Will the Premier raise auto pack rates on Manitobans this year again?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development, Investment and Trade.
Well, thank you again, Madam Speaker, and I certainly welcome a question on truth because I know there's none on the other side of the House, Madam Speaker. Let's talk about a little bit of truth, Madam Speaker. We know that the NDP cannot be trusted with Crown corporations.
Not at all.
They have a history of not being trusted, Madam Speaker. And as the leader of the opposition barks out at me, let me remind him what he did with FleetNet, Madam Speaker. Yeah. They actually went on Amazon, eBay, Madam Speaker, to try to look for parts for our 911 service, Madam Speaker. They were found standing in Walmart talking to the greeter saying, I want rollback so I can buy to support FleetNet in Manitoba, Madam Speaker. That's just wrong. We'll get it right.
Hear, hear.
Order. The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Madam Speaker, Christina Bowman is a 91-year-old great-grandmother who was living happily in her own house in Selkirk until she had a fall on March 10th. Since then, she has been transported away from her home community to Ericsdale, and her family is quite frankly devastated. They want to be by her side, but it's a 2-hour drive for all of her kids, and they've got to take time off work to visit her. And with the recent bad weather, unfortunately, that's just not possible for much of her family. Her daughter Barb says, and I quote, "We can't keep doing this." Will this Premier admit that her continued support of Brian Palliser's cuts to healthcare means Manitobans like Christina Brown, are being separated from their families?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and my sincere sympathies to Christina Brown on her fall and her injury. In the later years, I know that falls can lead to a lot of trauma in the body, so my sympathies. Now, these decisions are being made by health system leaders, Madam Speaker. They're not being made by politicians here at the Legislative Building. They're being made to ensure that individuals are receiving care in the right place at the right time and the level of care that they need, and to create as well opportunities for those who are waiting for care to get that care. We will continue to work on ensuring, like we did, that individuals are reimbursed for their expenses.
The member's time has expired. The Honourable Member for Union Station on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, that's no comfort for Christina or her family. Christina was happy in her own home, but now far away from her family, her mental health is declining, and doctors say that she's starting to show signs of depression. Barb says her mother asks her every single time she visits her, "Can I come home now?" But the doctors say that she'll need to be there for many months. We know this Premier thinks that there were some improvements with Brian Palliser's healthcare cuts, That's a pretty tepid endorsement of her own record. What has improved about healthcare delivery for Christina and her family?
The Honourable Minister of Seniors and Long-Term Care.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I would indicate that this government is certainly working diligently to satisfy the needs of seniors who wish to stay in their homes for as long as possible, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, this government announced a $12.6 million investment in self and family managed care, which goes to assist those individuals who wish to stay at home and be cared for as long as possible at home. So this government is working diligently to satisfy that need, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Union Station on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, that minister is talking about announcements this government has made, and it seems to think that this PC government believes that their work stops once they've held a press conference. Christina Bowman's family has asked the MLA for Selkirk to do something. His office forwarded it to the minister, and her office said they'd respond in maybe 10 business days. Yet another long wait as her mother's health declines. Her daughter Barb says that her mother has lived in Selkirk almost her entire life, almost 91 years, Madam Speaker. Why can't Christina Bowman get the health care that she needs alongside her family support right in her own community?
The Honourable Minister of Seniors and Long-Term Care.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And this government, as I mentioned, is working diligently to fulfill the needs of seniors. The budget of my department increased by 72%, Madam Speaker, to ensure that we're able to fulfill the needs. We've announced the senior strategy, which has had a number of initiatives come forward to assist seniors and ensure that they're able to get things like hearing aid supports and other initiatives such as that. This government is supporting seniors. That side of the House never did.
The Honourable Member for the Maples.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Years of cuts under Paul Stephenson government have significantly damaged the capacity of the hard-working people in our public service to meet the growing demand of our population. Vital stats is just one area where we have highlighted where the PC government fails families with a long waiting for basic and necessary documentation, celebrating the birth of child or marriage. Our FIPA request shows that. When will this Premier stop the cuts and stop the vacancy management that is starving our public service?
The Honourable Minister of Consumer Protection and Government Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate that the member did voice appreciation for the diligent work of the people in our civil service. I can join him in that acknowledgement. I do very much appreciate the work that's being done at Vital Statistics. It continues to receive my attention, and we continue to make improvements to the way that services are delivered there and to the staffing levels there.
The Honourable Member for the Maples on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, the Paul Stephenson government has cut the number of public servants in the government by 11.3%.
Shame.
That means fewer staff to help the public by processing applications in battle stats. That means fewer conservation officers protecting our environment and wildlife. That means more privatization work to external consultants because they don't have an internal capacity to get the job done. When will this minister stop the disrespect toward those public servants who serve the people of our province?
The Honourable Minister of Consumer Protection and Government Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We on this side of the House have nothing but respect for the civil service and the amazing work that they do. I just want to highlight one of the things that the folks at Vital Statistics recently accomplished, and that was putting forward call to action number 71 from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. That work had remained undone for several years, but now that has been accomplished. Manitoba is one of the first provinces to do so, to ensure that residential school survivors and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission have access, unfettered access to the records that are available in vital statistics to be able to do their research. I'm proud of that work, and I think it's very important. I hope the member agrees.
The honourable member for the Maples on the final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, government has attacked public sector workers since the moment they were elected 7 years ago. They slashed up public service, froze wages, forced union members to fight each other, and delayed bargaining of fair contract. Many are still waiting. Health sports staff are still waiting for the retro pay they negotiated and that this government promised. Allied Health still don't have a contract yet. That's over 5 years, Madam Speaker.
Shame.
When will the PC government stop the attack on our public servants?
Here.
The Honourable Minister of Consumer Protection and Government Services.
Madam Speaker, when we talk about respecting civil servants, we talk about respecting also the people who work in this building. And I know for years, under the NDP, women, especially in this building, were not treated well. The former member for Dauphin Stan Struthers was sexually harassing staffers. Nothing was done. Nothing was done. Madam Speaker, the members opposite were aware.
Order.
Some of them were on staff or elected at that time. They did nothing. They said nothing. They offered no support for...
Order. Order. The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We asked written questions about the inquiry into the link, formerly McDonald Youth Services, and were concerned about the answers. The minister said that they first learned of problems about the link in December 2022. We learned in January, had asked twice before an investigation was launched, and was promised for March, and it's now April with no report. But the investigation by Deloitte will not investigate individual claims of employee harm, which means it's been crafted to ignore all the most serious allegations, including preferential hiring, dangerously short-staffed programs, and mistreatment of Indigenous staff and youth. How is the Deloitte investigation supposed to provide viable recommendations when it ignores all the most serious allegations?
The Honourable Minister of Families.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And we, on this side of the House, are committed to high standards of care and service for Manitoba's children and youth. And certainly the services that are provided by the link are something that our government is very committed to, and ensuring that those are the best quality services available for the children and the youth who depend on those services on a regular basis. When these allegations were brought to our attention, we did hire a third-party evaluator to conduct an evaluation, and that work is, there was an interim report that has been provided. I would respectfully ask the time to review that interim report, and that work is ongoing at the link.
The honourable member for St. Boniface on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The link also serves community living disability services, and foster parents have told us that changes to respite pay have been a nightmare. Each child gets at least $9,300 in respite a year, but the link portions it out monthly on a use it or lose it basis, which means that foster children with disabilities who can't get respite because of a worker shortage can't carry their respite forward, so they may be missing out on $10,000 or more a year, and the link won't tell them how much they've got left, and the money is being denied to children with disabilities. Emails and warnings to management are ignored, and a foster parent contacted us said when we question policy changes, they threaten to take children from us. Will the minister ask the Auditor General to perform an audit of the link today?
The Honourable Minister of Families.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And of course, our government takes allegations very seriously. That is why we've hired a third-party evaluator. That is why we're doing an evaluation, and that is why we are going to continue to ask these questions to ensure that the best quality service is available. The member opposite mentioned respite, and we agree on this side of the House that it is a vital service for families to be able to access. And in last year's budget, we put forward significant dollars so that we could have new respite homes opened up in the city of Winnipeg and Brandon for families with children with disabilities. And Madam Speaker, it is really unfortunate, but that member voted against respite for children in this province of Manitoba. He has no credibility on this issue.
The honourable member for River Heights on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, in June of 2020, the government announced it would build 90 visitation units for family members to visit their loved ones in personal care homes during the pandemic. These visitation units were made from shipping containers. Many of the final 105 pods at a cost of $24 million were only sparingly used, so the program was less successful than hoped. Recently, the government has announced it's getting rid of these units. We've far too many people in Manitoba who are experiencing homelessness. Will the minister considering donating the units to organizations which help those experiencing homelessness, and what would be the conditions put on the organization accepting them?
The Honourable Minister of Consumer Protection and Government Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I know the member doesn't seem to think these shelters performed their purpose, but I can assure you from speaking with individuals that had the opportunity to visit in these shelters, they were very, very grateful for them. Now, the member suggests that the government should consider donating and repurposing some of these shelters for homeless, to house homeless individuals, and I wholeheartedly agree. Our priority, as expressed in the expression of interest, was not to sell them, but to donate them, and to donate them to organizations that are going to use them for a good community purpose. And certainly, I can imagine that housing homeless individuals would be a good community purpose. And I hope that the respondents to the expression of interest that have been put in includes those kinds of responses. Thank you.
The honourable member for Swan River. The honourable member for Swan River.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. Manitobans love our provincial parks because we have some of the greatest in the country. The minister responsible for provincial parks had previously discussed changes to the parks reservation system. We understand the NDP refused to update this system for the many dark years that they were in government. So can the minister elaborate on how the new system has enhanced user experience for Manitobans seeking to enjoy our beautiful natural spaces?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Northern Development.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my friend from Swan River for that great question. I am pleased to report that the new provincial park reservation system has been a tremendous success, enhancing park accessibility and user experience for all Manitobans. Since its implementation, we have received overwhelmingly positive feedback from park users who have found the system to be user-friendly, efficient, and reliable. Our government recognized the need for an improved reservation system and took the necessary steps to ensure the process was smooth and enjoyable for everyone. The success of the new park system not only demonstrates our commitment to investing in our parks, but also highlights our dedication to providing residents with easy access to the natural beauty of our province. Furthermore, we have implemented...
Due to some time lost during a question period with extended applause, etc., I'm going to allow one question from the next opposition member. The honourable member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Municipalities know this PC government does not like to work collaboratively. And we saw this when they passed Bill 37, which was bad legislation that took away community autonomy and created red tape. Bill 37 is costing municipalities millions of dollars in staff time, and it's clear the PCs were not listening to municipalities then, and they aren't listening now. Municipalities are still hoping this government will do the right thing and repeal Bill 37. Will the minister do so today?
Order. The Honourable Minister for Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's always a welcome opportunity to speak about the great things our government's doing for municipalities here in Manitoba, Madam Speaker. We're the government that created predictable funding models for the municipalities. Predictable funding, Madam Speaker. $47 million increase in operating, Madam Speaker. That does not include a $23.5 million cost, or $23.5 million infrastructure spending from our province to the municipalities, Madam Speaker. That's an increase, not a decrease, Madam Speaker. When the members opposite were in government, what did they do? They forced amalgamations. And when they fed opposition to it, they called them howling coyotes. On this side of the House, Madam Speaker, we work with municipalities. We just had a great debate with our Premier yesterday.
The member's time has expired. The time for oral questions has expired. Petitions. The Honourable Member for Transcona.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. Number 1, healthcare is a basic human right and a fundamental part of responsible public health. Many people in Manitoba are not covered by provincial healthcare. Migrant workers with work permits of less than 1 year, international students, and those undocumented residents who have lost their status for a variety of reasons. Number 2, private health insurance is not a substitute for public health insurance. Private insurance plans available to most migrant workers and international students are paid for by the worker or student. They do not provide coverage for all of the potential health needs covered by public health coverage. Individuals are required to pay upfront for health expenses without a guarantee that they will be covered and wait weeks for reimbursement. Number 3, racialized people and communities are disproportionately affected by the pandemic, mainly due to the social and economic conditions which leave them vulnerable while performing essential work in a variety of industries in Manitoba. Number 4, without adequate health care coverage if they are ill, many of those without provincial health coverage will avoid seeking health care due to fear of being charged for the care, and some will fear possible detention and deportation if their immigration status is reported to the authorities. Number 5, according to the United Nations Human Rights Committee, denying essential health care to undocumented, irregular migrants is a violation of their rights. Number 6, jurisdictions across Canada and the world have adopted access without fear policies to prevent sharing personal health information or immigration status with immigration authorities and to give uninsured residents the confidence to access health care. Number 7, the pandemic has clearly identified the need for everyone in Manitoba to have access to public health care to protect the health and safety of all who live in the province. We therefore petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows. Number 1, to urge the provincial government to immediately provide comprehensive and free public health care coverage to all residents of Manitoba regardless of immigration status, including refugee claimants, migrant workers, international students, dependent children of temporary residents, and undocumented residents. Number 2, to urge the Minister of Health and Seniors Care to undertake a multilingual communication campaign to provide information on expanded coverage to all affected residents. Number 3, to urge the Minister of Health and Seniors Care to inform all healthcare institutions and providers of expanded coverage for those without public health insurance and the details on how necessary policy and protocol changes will be implemented. And number 4, to urge the Minister of Health and Seniors Care to create and enforce strict confidentiality policies and provide staff with training to protect the safety of residents with precarious immigration status and ensure they can access public health care without jeopardizing their ability to remain in Canada. Madam Speaker, this petition is signed by Evan Crosney, David Gould, Carson Feigl, and many other Manitobans.
In accordance with our Rule 133, bracket 6, when petitions are read, they are deemed to be received by the House. The Honourable Member for the Pas-Camissac.
Madam Speaker, I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. Number 1, Provincial Road 224 serves Peguis First Nation, Fisher River Cree Nation, and surrounding communities. The road is in need of substantial repairs. Number 2, the road has been in poor conditions for years and has numerous potholes, uneven driving surfaces, and extremely narrow shoulders. Number 3, due to recent population growth in the area, there has been increased vehicle and pedestrian use of Provincial Road 224. Without repair, Provincial Road 224 will continue to pose a hazard to the many Manitobans who use it on a regular basis. Number 5, concerned Manitobans are requesting that Provincial Road 224 be assessed and repaired urgently to improve safety for its users. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the Minister of Infrastructure to complete an assessment of Provincial Road 224 and implement the appropriate repairs using public funds as quickly as possible. Madam Speaker, this petition has been signed by many, many fine Manitobans.
The Honourable Member for Elmwood.
Madam Speaker, I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background of this petition is as follows. Number 1, Manitoba consumers believe that products should last longer, be repaired when broken, and that planned obsolescence has environmental consequences and threatens a sustainable future. Number 2, in 2021, the European Union set minimum design standards for many electronic devices with new right-to-repair legislation. Number 3, the Biden administration in the U.S. has formally backed the right-to-repair movement in January 2022, following the European Union's lead. Number 4, right to repair enables consumers access to the resources needed to fix and modify their products, appliances, including cell phones, washing machines, and refrigerators. Number 5, right to repair also allows consumers and electronic repair businesses access to the most recent versions of repair manuals, replacement parts, software, and other tools that the manufacturer uses for diagnosing, maintaining, or repairing its branded electronic products. Number 6, right to repair further allows consumers to reset an electronic security function of its branded electronic products if the function is disabled during diagnosis, maintenance, or repair. Number 7, in addition, the right to repair ensures manufacturers replace electronic products at no cost or refund the amount paid by the consumer to purchase the electronic product where they refuse or are unable to provide manuals or replacement parts. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the provincial government to adopt right-to-repair legislation requiring manufacturers of electronic devices and appliances, including washing machines and fridges and farm machinery, to make information, parts, and tools necessary for repairs available to consumers in independent repair shops. And this petition is signed by many, many Manitobans.
Well,
the Honourable Member for River Heights.
Madam Speaker, I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. Many renters and tenants living in Winnipeg are unaware of the potentially high levels of lead in their drinking water due to lead water pipes. Drinking water with lead levels higher than 5 micrograms per litre is above Canada's national standard for drinking water quality and may be damaging to health, especially for children and expectant mothers. According to medical research, renters and tenants unaware of the potentially high lead levels in their drinking water because of old lead pipes are at risk of experiencing greater levels of mental illness. High levels of lead in drinking water due to lead pipes disproportionately affects Indigenous and lower-income communities. A 2019 Intrinsic study used data on lead exposure to predict that many children living in Point Douglas will have high and worrisome lead levels in their blood. Lack of knowledge of lead levels in water may result in the continuation of ongoing lead poisoning-related health issues for thousands of renters and tenants living in Winnipeg and elsewhere in Manitoba. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the provincial government to immediately act by requiring landlords to inform renters and tenants if their rental units have lead water pipes. To urge the provincial government to provide an adequate number of water filters on an annual basis for tenants where there are rental units with lead pipes. To urge the provincial government to immediately act by requiring the City of Winnipeg to replace all lead water pipes in Winnipeg by 2027, as the City of Regina is now doing. Signed by Ben Kramer, Hilary Drucksmann, James Fable, and many, many other Manitobans.
Grievances? Orders of the day, government business, the acting government House Leader.
There we go. My neighbors might come on here. Mine's on now. Can we please resolve to Committee of Supply?
It has been announced that the House will consider estimates this afternoon. The House will now resolve into Committee of Supply. Mr. Deputy Speaker, please take the chair.
They were shielded. So not sure. Yeah. Actually, number 12. Remember what the ability is. Yeah.
Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates of Executive Council. At this time, we invite Ministerial and Opposition staff to enter the chamber, and we ask the members to please introduce their staff in attendance if they so choose. As previously stated, in accordance with Sub-Rule 7816, during the consideration of departmental estimates, questioning for each department shall proceed in a global manner. I'll give a moment for those staff members to take their seats. The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll just introduce my staff who are here with us again today. We have Paul Gerard, who's the Clerk of Executive Council, Brad Sallin, who's the Chief of Staff, as well as Braden Jones, who's Director of Communications and Stakeholder Relations. I will get his title right, but one of these days. The guy who...
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I present to you Mark Rosner. Bon vivant.
Okay, the floor is now open for questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I'd like to ask the Premier if she can tell the committee who is responsible for the hiring of the current CEO at Manitoba Public Insurance.
The Honourable First Minister.
I believe it's the Board of MPI that's responsible for that.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
So the PC administration appoints the board at MPI. Just want to put that on the record. Was there a competitive search conducted for the current CEO of Manitoba Public Insurance?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yes, I believe there was.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
And did the hiring of the current CEO of Manitoba Public Insurance receive scrutiny or approval at Cabinet?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, I think I'll answer this question, but I do believe that some of these questions would be best put to the Minister of Justice, who's responsible for Manitoba Public Insurance. But of course, it is the board that is responsible for doing all the due diligence. At times, they hire a search firm to do this. I don't know all the details of that with respect to this specific case. Again, that can be found through MPI estimates, the Minister of Justice's estimates. And then, of course, the board makes a recommendation, and it's ratified through an order in council.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yes, so what due diligence did the government conduct on the CEO of MPI prior to ratifying the PC appointed board's recommendations with an order in council?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, again, I think those questions are better put to the Minister in terms of the details, but again, I'll just reiterate that the due diligence on the search, that all takes place at the board level of MPI, and the board then makes a recommendation, which is then ratified by way of an OIC.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Will the Premier call the chair of the board at MPI and the MPI CEO to a standing committee of Crown Corporations this month?
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Will the Premier call the leaders of MPI to a standing committee on Crown Corporations within the next month?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I believe that MPI was just before the Crown's Corporation Committee in December of just last year. Yeah, MPI was before that. You know, but certainly when it comes to accountability, we have no problem making sure that, I think that the typical process is when the Crown Corporation is called before the committee, that the CEO is there to answer questions, I believe, along with the chair. That's typically the process that takes place. I know the minister, again, who's also our House leader, will have more details about Crown corporations and when they will be meeting next. I will say that when it comes to accountability, I know the minister has already taken initiatives to do a review of what has transpired at Manitoba Public Insurance. He ordered that an external organization conduct that review. That review was called for earlier this week, I believe, on April 3rd. And certainly we want to make sure we get to the bottom of what has transpired there. And I think Manitobans want to know as well. And so those are the steps that we have taken.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yep, I'd like to wrap up.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, we will turn now to the resolution for this department, and we will now consider.
No, we have to ask the staff to move first.
Isn't that right after
Yep.
I say this? We will turn now to the resolution for this department, and we will now consider item 2.1A, the minister's salary contained in resolution 2.1. At this point, we request that all ministerial and opposition staff leave the chamber for the consideration of this last item, which they have done. The floor is open for questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yeah, I just want to move a motion here, and we're going to go on a little trip down memory lane, dig up one of the golden oldies. Rather than making the Premier's salary $1, I figured we'd take it back down to the level at which it would have been before Brian Pallister raised all his cabinet ministers' salaries by 20% in 2016. Oh, okay. No, I'll just leave those words on the record. I move, seconded, nope, not seconded by anybody. I move that line item 2.1A be amended so that the Premier's salary be reduced to $50,400.
Order, please. Order, please. It has been moved by the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition that line item 2.1A be amended so that the Premier's salary be reduced to $50,400. The motion is in order. Is there debate on the motion? Is the House ready for the question? Shall the motion pass? Yes. No. I hear a no. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed to the motion, please say nay. Nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. The motion is accordingly defeated. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
On division?
On division. It is defeated on division. No, I'm just going to read through this. Resolution 2.1, resolve that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $4,820,000 for Executive Council General Administration for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. This completes the estimates of Executive Council. The next set of estimates to be considered by this section of the Committee of Supply is for the Department of Economic Development, Investment and Trade. Shall we briefly recess to allow the Minister and critics the opportunity to prepare for the commencement of the next department? I hear a yes. We are recessed. Okay, we're all good to start. Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now consider the estimates of the Department of Economic Development, Investment and Trade. Does the Honourable Minister have an opening statement?
I do.
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development, Investment and Trade.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and it certainly is a pleasure to be here today to talk about all the exciting work and things that are happening in economic development and investment and trade. And as a matter of fact, I have a lot of it right here in front of me that I'm going to put on the record today, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to start right now. I'm proud to stand before you today to discuss Budget 2023 and the historic investments it makes to help improve the lives of all Manitobans. Our budget acts on the priorities of Manitobans who deserve safe, strong, and healthy communities and an inclusive economy that provides new opportunities, continued growth, and good jobs. To support these priorities, this budget makes significant investments that will grow our economy, strengthen our workforce, and make Manitoba the top destination to work, live, and invest. This includes important investments that will attract new investment, accelerate economic development, grow our mining sector, increase our competitiveness, strengthen our workforce, and advance economic reconciliation. Manitoba is home to Canada's largest inland port and foreign trade zone, putting us in a unique position to compete and succeed globally. That, combined with our many Manitoba advantages, is why we are working hard to identify new trade and investment opportunities. To support this work, we created a new investment and trade division that collaborates with businesses, stakeholders, and private sector to leverage Manitoba's competitive advantages to attract trade and investment opportunities. And to strengthen Manitoba's global reputation as a leading investment destination, we unveiled our new Invest Manitoba brand that sends a clear message to the world's business community: Manitoba is open for business. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Manitoba is open for business.
Thunderous applause.
To make the most of these new opportunities and support our businesses' communities, we are making strategic investments to accelerate economic growth across Manitoba. Our stakeholders and partners made it clear that access to capital is critical to the growth. So we are investing another $50 million in Manitoba First Fund, the venture capital fund that we launched last year to support businesses development at all stages. On that note, Mr. Chair, I'm pleased to report that our initial $50 million investment generated over $100 million in private sector interest and signaled our clear commitment to supporting the growth and expansion of Manitoba businesses and the great jobs they create. Adding to this, we are making a $15 million investment in the relaunched Communities Economic Development Fund's business loan program to boost strategic economic development in northern Manitoba. Because our province's talented entrepreneurial community is so important to innovation and growth, we are renewing and expanding our funding agreement with Futurepreneur so that Manitoba's youth can transform their innovative ideas into businesses that provide new products and services for local, national, and global audiences. Mr. Chair, last year, we made it our mission to make Manitoba a world-class mining destination, and we are already seeing those results. We are experiencing the highest level exploration expenditures in the history of our province. Major private sector investments in Manitoba by world-class companies like Vale, Hudbay, Alamos Gold, combined with emerging opportunities in lithium and silica sand mining that are seeing global demand and are clear signal of the promising future in this sector right here in Manitoba, Mr. Chair. A future that will create good jobs, economic growth, and new opportunities for Indigenous peoples, furthering our commitment to economic reconciliation. With the recent integration of the Resource Development Division into our department, we will lead the sustainable economic development of mineral, oil, and gas and aggregate extraction and production right here in Manitoba. To drive private sector investment, Mr. Chair, and growth, we are accelerating permitting processes to get mines up and running more quickly, reaffirming our commitment of $10 million over 3 years in Manitoba's Mineral Development Fund and adding 18, that's correct, 18 new full-time employees who will provide dedicated support to this industry. Our resource development must be safe, efficient, and environmentally sustainable. This is why we are using geoscience data to make informed decisions that maximize economic potential while mitigating environmental risks. Across all sectors, Budget 2023 commits to providing grant funding to encourage decarbonization and to fund innovative projects that protect Manitoba's environment. Furthermore, Mr. Chair, our government is committed to working with all First Nation communities across Manitoba to ensure that they are the main benefactor of the economic opportunity that mining and resource development will bring into their area. Budget 2023 also improves our tax competitiveness by increasing the payroll tax threshold for the 4th consecutive year. Mr. Chair, this will benefit approximately 900 employers, exempting 150 employees from tax entirely, and incentivize employers to hire more workers on increased wages. Our department is also enhancing the interactive digital media tax credit by expanding eligible expenditures to help attract investment, create jobs, and support growth in our growing media sector, which is home to both local startups and global companies. Our department continues to review and improve our business development programs and services to make them more accessible and responsive to the needs of our business community. This includes recent improvements to Innovation Growth Program and oil and gas reporting requirements. We are also working closely with our economic development partners to develop a new data sharing framework that will help us take quick action on emerging economic development opportunities. Our stakeholders have told us that workforce skill and supply shortages are the largest barrier to economic growth, and we know that is very apparent right across the world. And Budget 23 is focused on building a strong and talented workforce. And with Manitoba projected to have more than 114,000 job openings over the next 5 years, Mr. Chair, many requiring some post-secondary education and training, we need to take immediate action. This starts by enhancing and expanding the Sector Council program through an increase of $4.1 million annually for a historic investment, Mr. Chair, that's right, $40.4 million over the next 4 years to help sector deliver workforce training for new and existing employers right here in Manitoba. This major investment will increase the capacity of our Sector Council organizations, incentivize cross-sectorial collaboration, and create a dedicated film industry sector council to support workforce development in this very fast and continuing growing industry. Our workforce will also be strengthened by the record number of newcomers making Manitoba their home. But many are not working in fields of education and expertise best aligned to their talents and ambitions. Mr. Chair, to address this, Budget 2023 commits $3.6 million in 2023 for a new internationally educated professional program that will reduce financial barriers and help newcomers fill in demand jobs in regulated professions that match their education and professional experience, including those in our healthcare sector. Talent and attraction recruitment is essential, Mr. Chair, to a modern, skilled workforce, so we are partnered with Economic Development Winnipeg to create a Work in Manitoba job portal that connects local employers with local, national, and international job seekers to address immediate labor market needs. I was pleased to see that the federal government extended the top-up funding for the labor market transfer agreement. However, we are calling on them to immediately begin negotiations to strengthen the agreements by providing sufficient, predictable, and reliable funding over the long term. This will increase our ability to fully address workforce development needs at a time when stakeholders have said labor shortages is our top priority and their greatest barrier to growth. In April, I become the chair, actually the co-chair of the Forum for Labour Market Ministers while we are at a critical juncture with the transfer agreements. Mr. Chair, I will use this opportunity, along with my provincial and territorial colleagues, to advocate for sustainable funding from the federal government to ensure we can continue to deliver quality and a range of workforce supports for Manitobans and what Manitobans deserve. Budget 2023 reflects our commitment to economic reconciliation and the full participation of Indigenous peoples in the economy. So that all
the minister's time has expired.
So that all Manitobans.
Order, please. We thank the minister for those comments. Does the official opposition critic have any opening comments? The Honourable member for Fort Garry.
Yeah, we won't have any opening comments today. Just go straight to question. I got questions. Less speeches, more questions. Oh.
We thank the minister for those remarks. Under Manitoba practice, debate of the minister's salary is the last item considered for department in the Committee of Supply. Accordingly, we shall now defer consideration of line item 10.1 subsection A contained in resolution 10.1. At this time, we invite ministerial and opposition staff to enter the chamber, and I would ask the minister and critic to please introduce their staff in attendance. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development, Investment and Trade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's great to welcome a couple of our wonderful staff. Unfortunately, they all can't join us, but I'm flanked by Melissa Valentine and Michelle Wallace, and also in front of me, my Chief of Staff, Eric Salcher, is joining us here today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
In accordance with Sub-Rule 78, Subsection 16, during the consideration of departmental estimates, questioning for each department shall proceed in a global manner, with questions put on the resolutions once the official opposition critic indicates that questioning has concluded. The floor is now open for questions. The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Thank you. I'm wondering if the minister can advise what is the current vacancy rate in the department and how many full-time equivalent positions are right now being unfilled?
The Honourable Minister for Economic Development,
Thank you.
Investment and Trade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the member for the question. And as the member knows, at the end of January, there was a shuffle, and within that shuffle, there was. Did you want him to move over so we could address each other? Yeah. No, seriously. Yeah, good. There was also an additional department added to Economic Development, Investment and Trade, which was the mining sector. So currently, I can give you numbers as of February. There's still some shuffling going on as far as staff recruiting and whatnot, but 133 basically equivalent FTEs. And a vacancy rate of 28. And there is a hiring, right now we're looking at hiring in the hiring process of roughly 46. So that would be the numbers to date.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Now, the minister referenced mining being new to this portfolio. When Brian Pallister was Premier, Manitoba had 40 geologists under our employment. There's recent media reports saying that's down to 7. I'm wondering if the minister can confirm how many geologists we currently have. Is there a plan to hire more, and how more? And are we going to return to 40 prior to all the cuts?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development, Investments and Trade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly I'd like to thank the member for his patience as well. As he knows or maybe doesn't know, I'm a former entrepreneur myself and a business owner, and I know that it's very crucial that you put facts on the record, and I know the member would appreciate knowing exactly what getting an answer to the question that he's looking for. So providing that, it may take a little bit more time, but we do have it now. We're currently sitting with 12 FTEs as geologists, and we have 4 vacancies, which we're going to be pursuing. And we're also hiring 18 additional FTEs, incremental to the current staff allotment, to the mining support team to support essentially expediting permits in a fashion to ensure that the economic activity moves quickly, and mining firms and prospectors and developers have the opportunity to get into the ground quicker to also build our economy in Manitoba.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
I'm glad to see that this government is investing again in mining. My concern is that the minister has just indicated that there's now been a permanent cut of 10 geologists in Manitoba from the time they took over government in 2016. I'm wondering if you can explain the rationale of why we are going to have less geologists in Manitoba now than when this government took office in 2016, and how cutting back on geologists is helpful in expanding the mining industry in Manitoba, and whether the minister sees a conflict in the stated commitment of this government in mining, but the lack of actual resources in hiring geologists to make that actually happen.
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development, Investment and Trade.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and maybe you give the member a little bit of a history lesson. For 17 years, the NDP didn't even know what mining was, and they certainly walked away from an industry. And I know the member from Flin Flon would probably agree with me, but certainly he knows there was no investment in the mining sector under the current NDP. As a matter of fact, his leader that he's currently sitting in the leaders of the opposition's chair right now, he could probably feel the vibes from the leader about the LEAP manifesto that he signed, saying that minerals, particularly critical minerals like zinc, copper, and lithium, should just simply stay in the ground. We don't need it, according to the member from Fort Rouge and the leader of the official opposition. So I don't know exactly, and I can't comment for what happened during the NDP government's time with respect to how many geologists were hired, but I can tell you that it was unfortunate they weren't able to do their job because the NDP walked away from mining. We are committed to mining. The member knows that. The member from Flin Flon knows that. And certainly we will continue to develop that mining sector in collaboration with all the stakeholders right across the province, including northern Manitoba, by the way, which is going to be booming under our government. And we're looking forward to that boom.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
So I think the government is doing a great job of keeping it in the ground when we have 8 geologists down from 40 when they took office. So if we currently only have 8 geologists and this government's committed to hiring 22 more geologists, how much time is it going to take to hire those 22 more geologists? And are we having to look across Canada and internationally to actually find them and recruit them to come here to Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I'll simply try to provide some facts for the member. Again, he's quite focused on the number of geologists that are required to grow the mining sector. And well, I'm more focused on the mining sector, growing the mining sector. Government should be there to help and enable the sector to grow and ensure that once the partners are working together, to simply just back off, let them go. Businesses know, they know how to grow. And a case in point, I'll just put a few of the mining sectors or mining companies on the record for the member, and I know the member from Flin Flon will love this information. Vale announced a $150 million investment to extend current mining activities in the Thompson area by 10 years. Great news for northern Manitoba. Snow Lake Lithium announced that they would raise over $27 million in their initial public offering to support lithium exploration in Snow Lake. Alamos Gold continues to pursue their project near Lynn Lake. The consultation process has been concluded, and the company is expected to conduct additional exploration and complete updated feasibility studies this year. PADCOM, first time in Manitoba, has completed Manitoba's first potash development near Harrowby in the municipality of Russell Binscart. We know that PADCOM partnered with Gambler First Nation. Again, a sign that our government recognizes economic reconciliation is so important to First Nations, not only in northern Manitoba, but right across the province. Great news. Companies know what they're doing. First Nations know what they're doing. Government should just simply be there to support them and get out of the way when they want to start building the economy right here in Manitoba.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
So when the government talks about supporting industry, well, how they do it is having government geologists. So I'm wondering if the minister, who didn't answer my question, can tell this committee the drop-dead date, what will be the targeted date when all 22 geologists will be hired and under the employ of Manitoba, and we will have a zero vacancy rate for geologists. How many years from now is that date?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I know the member feels that he's not getting an answer, but he has been getting an answer of all the success that's happening in the mining sector, and also our government's commitment to ensuring that there's enough horsepower there and resources in the FTE and full-time equivalents, of course, in the sector and right across government, actually. So I think the argument that the member is trying to make is he thinks the benchmark is X, and he's suggesting that we think the benchmark is Y. Well, I think the proof is in the pudding. And if the member wants to play back over the weekend when he's having some turkey dinner with the family, he can play back some of the great news that we put on the record about how the industry is growing based on the current benchmark. Now, the member also knows that staffing issues are a challenge right throughout not only Manitoba, but throughout Canada and the world, quite frankly. But I know the member from Flin Flon would probably find a job easy for sure because of all the great work we're doing in the north when he decides to retire from politics. But certainly we know and we recognize there's staff shortages right across the world, and we are actively recruiting new hires for not only the mining sector but particularly in edit, where we know that we have some great folks and great horsepower to ensure that the economy continues to grow under their watch. And again, the addition of 19 full-time FTEs in an investment of $5 million is going to help make that happen in budget 2023.
The honourable member for Fort Garry.
I think the minister's non-answer is concerning to Manitobans, because clearly they don't have a plan and they don't know when they're going to fill these 22 vacancies, if at all. But I will move on because our time is short today. Now, the minister had indicated that there's a general 28% vacancy rate in the department, 133 FTE positions. Again, a shocking number. I'm wondering if he can outline what sectors or departments within his ministry have the highest vacancy, and maybe an explanation as to why.
The honourable minister.
New Mr. Chair, good to see you. Welcome to the chair. A member from McPhillips. And thank you again for that question. And as I alluded to earlier, our government is working hard, as many other sectors, whether it be public or private sector, at recruiting and hiring full-time staff. It's interesting, I met with the Restaurants Association today, Sean Jeffries, and boy, oh boy, that sector, like every sector, the trucking sector, you name it, they're all going through challenges with finding staff to work, period. And I know one of the challenges was when I was at the, I went to meet the federal Canadian bank rep, his name escapes me now, but he did a little bit of a program at the Met, and it was interesting to hear, and the member would like this actually. It was interesting to hear, and I will get his name because I know you'd want to look him up, that the Manitoba is performing better than any other jurisdiction in Canada. His words, not mine, which is fantastic. And I actually will endeavor to get that information to the member if he's interested. But also, he really highlighted the labor market in Manitoba. He said, and he recognizes, as we do, the labor market in Manitoba is challenged. And we said, why? And he said, well, I'll tell you why. Because almost 25% of your labor force are baby boomers, and they retired over the last 18 months. And he said that created a massive vacuum in the labor pool right here in Manitoba, particularly in the city of Winnipeg. And we found that to be very helpful information for our government, and I know the member would probably appreciate it too. I know he owns his own business, and certainly I'm sure he's signed a payroll check before and knows how difficult it is to retain and continue to have good quality staff to work for you, maybe even to work on your social media accounts or something. But maybe that's something that the member needs to look at. But I can tell you that we're working hard. We hired 19 new FTEs. We're continuing to hire in the resource development sector, which we know under the NDP's watch was essentially broken down to nothing. 40 geologists, and the member says we're working there. And those folks, I hope they're hearing us today, and if they are, I welcome you to please reach out to our department, because we want you back, we respect you, and we know that you can help grow the economy, particularly in the mining sector.
The honourable member for Fort Garry.
Yeah, I wonder if the minister can tell the committee what question he was answering just now.
The honourable minister.
Sure, and I'll even answer it again. The department, the area in our department that is currently one of the highest vacancy rates, and that's resource development. That's why I put on the record that we're actively hiring. We're continuing to hire. We hired 19. We're going to keep going down that process. But maybe the member didn't hear me before, but also finding labor is a challenge, and our government recognizes that, but we're having some success.
The honourable member for Fort Garry.
Thank you, Minister. I have a question about the supplement of estimates. I'm looking at last year's 2022-2023, and in this sort of infographic, it talks about a summary expenditure of the department in 2021-2022 of $193 million, and core staffing of 369.4 FTE positions. Then I'm looking at this year's supplemental and the 2022-2023 summary of expenditures dropped by 10 million. It's 183 million, and the core staffing now is at 472.40 positions. There seems to be a discrepancy there. You got $8 million less money and 100 more positions. So I'm wondering if you can reconcile those numbers, because they quite frankly don't make any sense. How do you get 100 more positions, but you've cut funding by $8 million?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, I appreciate the question from the member. And the simple answer is simply that through the government restructuring in late January, early February, there was obviously a massive restructure, particularly within our department, and certainly that the numbers are not, it's not apples to apples, it's actually apples to oranges in this case, because you can't really compare one to the other when your department has a totally different, we'll call it a facelift for lack of a better term, and with new initiatives that have moved on, FTEs that have moved to other departments, cash flows have changed, needs have changed, requirements have changed. It is, as you can see, and as you mentioned, the member across the way, 472 FTEs. Earlier, if I played back the answer, at one time you were concerned about not having enough FTEs. Well, we've actually gone up by 100, and now you're concerned that there's too many. So we continue to ensure that we have a full complement within our department, and certainly I'm looking forward to sitting on this side of the chamber next year and having this discussion on an apples-to-apples comparison instead of apples to oranges.
The MLA for Fort Garry.
Thank you. I'm wondering if the minister can advise, when is the mining strategy going to be released?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, early summer.
The Honourable MLA for Fort Garry.
Earlier, the government had promised that it would be late spring. I'm wondering if the minister could explain why it's now being delayed.
The Honourable Minister.
June is June 21st, I believe, is the first day of summer. The last day of spring would be June 20th. So somewhere between there and there.
The Honourable MLA for Fort Garry.
I wonder if the minister can advise who's been consulted in the creation of that strategy.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, the release of the mining strategy, as we talked about, will be coming early summer, late spring. Certainly we've been consulting with stakeholders, and we're looking forward to continuing that process. And I can assure the member that all stakeholders that we've spoken to are excited about the steps we're taking to continue to grow this mining sector, and we'll certainly look forward to presenting that strategy in early summer.
The Honourable MLA for Fort Garry.
Thank you. Have First Nations or Indigenous organizations been consulted in relation to the mining strategy? And if so, who?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, again, I mentioned in my opening comments about economic reconciliation, Mr. Chair, and it's a top priority for our government, and certainly when we say stakeholders, we include First Nations and Indigenous people.
The Honourable MLA for Fort Garry.
I wonder if the Minister can advise what First Nations and Indigenous organizations have been consulted.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you. And again, with the mining strategy being introduced sometime this spring, summer, we'll definitely be able to ensure that our stakeholders continue to advise us on what they want to see in that strategy. And I haven't even seen a draft at this point, so it would be too soon to start naming stakeholders. Look, stakeholders are being consulted, and they will continue to be consulted, and they are in the process of drafting, along with Indigenous, First Nations, and stakeholders across Manitoba, but outside of Manitoba too, because we know when we were at PDAC in Toronto, the largest mining conference in the world, we were consulting with, as a matter of fact, we had meetings with Indigenous groups, First Nations. We had meetings with mining firms, prospectors, developers, you name it. We've been consulting with absolutely everybody. To put individual names on the record, I don't have that at my disclosure, but I can tell you that Manitobans, First Nations, Indigenous, and industry have been fully consulted and are leading the charge on the mining strategy.
The Honourable MLA for Fort Garry.
Thank you. Well, will the Minister undertake to this committee to provide a full list of who's been consulted as of this date to this committee when you obviously have that information?
The Honourable Minister.
As soon as the strategy is released, the member will get a copy.
The Honourable MLA for Fort Garry.
This is really straightforward question, so it's concerning that the Minister is either doesn't know or is refusing to answer. So he's certainly giving Manitobans the impression he hasn't consulted with the Indigenous community, otherwise he wouldn't be so cagey and flip it. So I will ask the Minister again whether he will undertake to provide a full listing of everyone consulted for this mining strategy as of the date of this hearing.
The Honourable Minister.
When the strategy is completed and it's delivered, it will be public, and the member will have a good opportunity to review it and comment further at that point. Certainly, we haven't seen a draft and we continue to develop it, so I think the member should move on at this point.
The Honourable MLA for Fort Garry.
Would the Minister advise whether he has consulted any environmental organizations in relation to the mining strategy, and if so, who?
The Honourable Minister.
Many stakeholders have been consulted.
The Honourable MLA for Fort Garry.
I think the minister might have some trouble hearing me. The question was whether he had consulted any environmental organizations in relation to the mining strategy, and if so, who? And if he hasn't, simply state on the record that that's the case, that he has not consulted with any environmental organizations.
The Honourable Minister.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And, I'm feeling a little insulted by the member saying I didn't hear him, because I did turn 60 this year. And I know that I have an appointment with my audiologist very soon because my hearing is poor. But certainly I understand the question, and I feel I've answered it to the best of my knowledge. But when I get those hearing aids in the coming weeks or so, we can have this discussion again, probably when the review and the strategy is delivered to Manitobans.
The Honourable MLA for Fort Garry.
I'm wondering why the minister is refusing to answer whether he has consulted with environmental groups in relation to a mining strategy for the province.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Chair. And as I mentioned many times, we've consulted with many stakeholders from all areas that would be involved in the mining strategy, Mr. Chair, whether it be environmentalists, whether it be First Nations, indigenous, also business, mining firms, all those folks are continuing to be at the table as we continue to move forward with the mining strategy, to be released sometime in early summer, late spring.
The Honourable MLA for Fort Garry.
I'm wondering if the minister can advise whether there will be a value-added strategy as part of the mining strategy. And what I mean by that, is there a plan to process minerals here in Manitoba, or are we simply just going to take them out of the ground and ship them elsewhere?
The Honourable Minister.
And I welcome the member back to the chair. Thank you for that question. And again, the review is being done. The full scope is going to be looked at in the review and the mining strategy, again, with within consultation, of course, with the stakeholders that we've mentioned many times on the record. And if one thing for sure, and the member would probably know this too, one thing that the pandemic taught us and really opened up, and there were many areas, of course, but this particular area, the supply chain area, we know how it affected our everyday lives, not only in Manitoba but across the world, whether it was simply getting certain fruits and vegetables and food, whether you're looking at buying or leasing a new vehicle, putting a new truck on your fleet, a number of areas that were suffering with supply chain shortages, and certainly that put a lot of stress on the economy, and particularly in Canada and Manitoba too was of course, part of that. But what it did show us is we need to focus on ensuring that we are, and our manufacturing firm, let me step back a bit. I want to talk and praise our manufacturers here in Manitoba. We lead the country in manufacturing. It's just incredible the amount of talent we have here in Manitoba, whether it be in any sector when it comes to manufacturing, but particularly in the pharmaceutical sector. One thing that just blew me away when I was at, thank you to my colleague, you're right. When we were at the BAM dinner and the awards dinner about a month ago, something that the member would like to hear too, and maybe he knows, but it's amazing how big our pharmaceutical sector is here in Manitoba. I didn't even know this, but we are the largest exporter of medicaments here in Manitoba, to particularly down in the U.S. in the Tennessee area, and it's amazing. I didn't even realize how big it was, and it's certainly we have the opportunity here with the talent we have, whether it be in the science field or just simply the entrepreneurial field, to actually build out the supply chain and ensure that we're putting value added into the mix. So I would assume going forward, and I've heard from our stakeholders that yes, value added definitely needs to be looked at, and we're looking forward to seeing the results of that study come early summer, late spring.
The honourable member for Fort Garry.
I'm wondering if the minister can advise how many exploration permits have been issued in 2021, 2022, and currently in 2023.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in fiscal 21-22, there were 31. Fiscal 22-23, currently there are 101 active dispositions.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
I'm wondering if the Minister can advise how many active mines there are in Manitoba and how many are Canadian owned.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, I appreciate the patience from the member opposite as well as we endeavour to get some further information. Currently, we have 3 active mines, and 1 is Canadian-owned. And further to that, I just wanted to put on the record, and the member may or may not know this, but very important work our government is doing in ensuring that we continue to invest in this sector. And one way we're doing that, again, is the Manitoba Mineral Development Fund. And again, that's committed to developing more sustainable mining sector that benefits Northern and Indigenous peoples, advancing shared goals, promotes economic reconciliation, and creates long-term growth and prosperity. So to that point, Manitoba has also committed $10 million over 3 years as part of the Manitoba Mineral Development Fund to support Northern economic growth through private sector investment, community partnerships, skill development, and job creation. And again, we just did some recent enhancements to the MMDF fund to focus on streamlining applications, as I mentioned in my comments earlier, with the addition of the 19 FTEs and expanding grant funding to increase responsible mineral exploration, strengthening our mining supply chain, and build additional partnerships with Indigenous communities and organizations. So our government is taking action, there's no doubt, and since its inception, actually, of the MMDF, the fund approved over $8.1 million towards 53 projects involving 31 community industry partnerships that is expected to leverage over $55.3 million to create more than 200 jobs. Boy, I wish the member from Flin Flon was here. That's a takeaway, and I know the member from Fort Rouge or Fort Garry will probably pass this information on to him because I know how interested he is in the mining sector, particularly jobs. 200 more jobs, $55.3 million. We're continuing to grow this sector. We're committed to doing it.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Given that there's only one Canadian company that actually owns a Manitoba mine, I'm wondering if the minister has any concerns or has any policy preference to favor Canadian-owned mines, and does human rights considerations ever factor into us issuing licenses, perhaps to authoritarian, undemocratic regimes with human rights abuses and horrible records? Does the government think along those lines at all, or they're prepared to issue licenses to whatever company comes and is willing to mine in Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly appreciate the question again from my colleague. I'm concerned about the last comments, though, that the member made with respect to just licensing or getting anybody to come into Manitoba to mine. That's just simply reckless, and it's certainly not anything that our government would do. I can't speak for the NDP, but I know our government wouldn't go down that path. That's why we have some of the most stringent licensing environmental process right here in Manitoba. And certainly we recognize in working with industry that we needed to focus in on ensuring that we're protecting the environment, but also ensuring that we're expediting the permit process in a balanced way as we work with stakeholders, and particularly First Nations and indigenous folks, on economic reconciliation. So lots at play there for sure. It's not government that should be sitting picking winners and losers when it comes to who wants to set down roots here in Manitoba. Certainly we have, as we mentioned earlier on in some of the discussions, we have a lot of interest in the mining sector. We have many prospectors and developers working now in the north. The member knows the path towards actually getting a mine to a point where it can open. It can take 5-10 years before the site is properly assessed by all parties and ensuring that it's environmentally safe in relation to ensuring that we're protecting it, but also working with First Nations on economic reconciliation, which is new, which we introduced, and we ensure that that process continues. So to the member's question, again, I think I've answered it, but we certainly won't take a reckless approach when it comes to growing this particular sector or any sector in Manitoba. Licensing, stringent environmental process, and good, solid, transparent reconciliation discussions, conversations, and that's the way we're going to continue to do business, and that's why the member will probably admit that that's why the sector's growing, because we take it seriously.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
So I'm wondering if the minister can advise if a Manitoba mining company gets any kind of preferential treatment from the province of Manitoba, or it's treated just as any other mining company, including international conglomerates and giants that come here.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, and as I mentioned earlier to the member, and certainly as answered, it's not for us to pick winners and losers. Look, this is a free and open market. Anybody that wants to set down roots in Manitoba should be welcome here. I hope that the member and the NDP are not suggesting that that's a process that we should move away from. We want to grow business here. That's why the sign coming into Winnipeg, whether you're flying in or driving in, says we're open for business, and we are open for business. That's why we've made investments in partnership with the Winnipeg Airport Authority to ensure that we open up more direct flights to let the world know that you come to Winnipeg, you come to Manitoba, you can open up a business here, whether it's in the filming industry or the mining industry. So we're proud of that record. We're going to continue to do that, and industry will do what it does. However, it needs to ensure that it's running through a stringent environmental and licensing process, and we'll make sure that happens.
Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
So just to clarify the minister's comments, a Manitoba company would get no assistance or special treatment at all to establish a mine in Manitoba, and they would have to compete with whatever massive conglomerate wants to come in here, and this government would stand by and let that happen.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, it's kind of question and answer, so I'm going to throw it back to the member and ask him a question. What is he referring to as far as special treatment to a Manitoba company?
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
This is the Minister of Economic Development. So I'm wondering, as the Minister of Economic Development, what policies does he have in place to develop Manitoba's small mines?
The Honourable Minister.
Manitoba Mineral Development Fund, $10 million over the next 3 years. It doesn't pick or choose which company can apply.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Now, it's been widely reported in the media that there are Russian oligarchs who own Manitoba companies and have financial assets in Manitoba. Some of these individuals are extremely close with the Putin regime and are actually on a federal sanctions list. I'm wondering what steps has this minister and his department and this government done to seize those assets and liquidate them in order to support the federal government sanctions list.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly We continue to work on many fronts with the federal government, and anything respecting national security. We would definitely be working with the feds on something like the member had mentioned, but again, we need to continue to focus on Manitoba. We're talking about a mining sector that was ignored for almost 2 decades by the former NDP government, and certainly we're continuing to clean up that mess and making some significant inroads to restoring the Open for Business sign in Manitoba, and we'll continue to go down that road. But anything with respect to national security concerns, I know and certainly I'm extremely proud of our Premier leading the Confederation of Premiers and at COF, pardon me, and certainly the Premier and her great work and leading that group of premiers from territories and provinces across this great country would also be concerned too. So being a federal matter, the province would have eyes on it and work in collaboration with our federal partners. And for the record, I just wanted to, I mentioned to the member that I was going to get the name of the Bank of Canada BDC rep that we went and spent the morning at during his presentation. His name is Pierre Cleroux, Cleroux, and he's actually the research and chief economist for Canada. I suggest that the member under his new portfolio go and check out, and certainly I'd help him to find that information if he needs it. But the research and chief economist presentation is online. He can pull it up, and he can reference some of those numbers and percentages that we talked about early on. Just astonishing to see how great Manitoba is doing in all sectors when it comes to the lowest unemployment rate in the country, leading in economic growth, and particularly in the mining sector, where Manitoba was in the top 5 years ago, where we ended up in I believe it was double digits. We fell right off the charts.
Time being 5 p.m., committee rise, call in speaker. The hour being 5 p.m., this House is adjourned and stands adjourned until 10 a.m. on Tuesday. Have a good weekend, everybody.